When choosing between style, comfort,
Got it, brother. Hold on. Got it, brother.
All right, hold on, Greg.
I already got it. I saw you launched it. But wait, I got to still share it.
Oh, okay. I thought you did already.
Oh, you thought I was already ready? No,
Yeah.
I didn't know it was there until just now.
No problem.
All right, sir. I am good to go whenever you are.
Okay, Greg.
Welcome, everyone. It is
Greg, hold on.
6:19
You're not live. Hold on.
Oh, I'm not on?
I was just agreeing with you. Hold on.
Okay. Oh, I seem to be a little out of sync tonight. Good thing I have the whole show to myself, huh?
I understand. Hold on.
We got 50 minutes to get my mojo back.
Okay, here we go in 5 seconds. And take it, Greg.
Welcome, everyone. It's 6:19 on Monday night. You're listening to the 245th installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour on www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. If you're new to the show, I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels. We provide one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to thrive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face when they don't have a proper safety net. This program is brought to you every week at the same time, courtesy of the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Ruben is on the big board tonight. Robin is producing. As always, so good to see you both and so good to have you listening from your computers or in your cars in New Jersey, around the country and beyond. Now, please take a moment. If you're looking at us on Facebook or YouTube, hit all the buttons for me. We need you to like and subscribe and share, because what we're going to talk about tonight is relevant to everyone in your world. It's true. This topic of the foster care to prison pipeline affects everyone, everywhere, in every community, and I need you to share it, okay? So I want you to hit like, hit subscribe, share it, ring the bell, whatever it requires, do it. Do it for the kids. And you know what we're going to talk about tonight is not going to be on the nightly news. No way. It's actually up to us to spread this word. Okay, we got to do it. Tonight, we're going to focus on the need to decriminalize youth in the foster care system. But first, we've been taking a weekly look at sort of where the money goes. And so tonight, we want to zero in on sort of on the foster care system. And I told you last week, if you heard the show, that all that money goes through the administration of children and families. And when I say all that money, I'm talking about 15% of a $73 billion budget. So basically 12 billion. I keep saying million by accident. I just can't get used to the B. But you're talking about a $12 billion budget, which is just the part of the budget that is foster care, 15% of that. The whole $73 billion, that's got to get divided up in a whole bunch of other ways. There's a nice big pie chart that you can look at online, and 17% goes to Head Start, and 16% goes to child care. It's really interesting. And when you look at this, you say to yourself, oh my, we're covering all the bases. That looks pretty good to me. But when you do it as percentages, instead of as actual dollars, and then when you present it in a way that doesn't have like how many dollars versus how many actual dollars are needed and what's the shortfall, then the whole picture might not be there. And these things are not that easy to find out. But what we're going to focus on tonight is the $12 billion that goes into this part of the ACF, the Administration of Children and Families. It's actually part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So the big umbrella organization is Health and Human Services, HHS. And under HHS is ACF, the Administration of Children and Families. Okay? And there's the ones who administer. They dole out, 73 billion, or if the new budget's approved, that's going to go up to 94 billion. That's important. It's going to put over 20 billion more into this pipeline. And my question to you as an audience is, can you imagine what it's like to have $73 billion to pass out? I think it would make me pass out. That's pretty much what would happen. It's a ridiculous concept to pass out that much money, but I want you to feel it, because what we have to realize when we're talking about the child care system is that it is ginormous. It is so big, it's ridiculous. So when we talk about, getting things right, how can that be? How could you administer $14 billion to, well, I'm going to tell you how many children in just a moment, because guess what? Underneath that umbrella of the Department of Health and Human Services, where the Administration of Children and Families gets all this money, there's a little subset of that group called the Children's Bureau. The Children's Bureau, this is again part of the United States Department of Health and Human Services, but it's under the Administration for Children and Families. Are you digging it? It's Children's Bureau, by the way. We don't say CB. That's one without an acronym. You just say Children's Bureau. Okay? They did a report about this, and in their report they said that there were approximately, this is 2020 information written in 2023. It takes forever to accumulate this kind of information. So when you can get good government information, that's what you go with. Children's Bureau says there were approximately 407,000 children in foster care in 2020. The foster care to prison pipeline refers to the funneling of children who are in foster care into juvenile detention or adult incarceration. By age 17, over 50% of foster children will have an encounter with the juvenile legal system through arrest, conviction, or detention. Okay, so this is now, we're just talking about kids who are really involved in the system through arrest, conviction, or detention. 50% by age 17. Half. We're going to, in a minute, we're going to add to that just all the kids who are constantly interacting with police, who are not necessarily being arrested or detained or questioned by them, but who may be getting transported. And in some of the most awkward ways that you'll hear about in just a minute. So there, by age 17, half, 1 in 2 is going to be actually part of the legal system. They're going to get caught up in some jackpot somewhere. In addition, 25% of youth in foster care will be involved with the criminal legal system within 2 years of leaving foster care. So if they're not already, they will be. If a child has moved, now here's an interesting little, I don't know, this is causal, but it certainly is correlative. If a child has moved to 5 or more placements, and seriously, if you've been in the system for a while, who hasn't? They are at a 90% risk of being involved with the criminal legal system. Scary, And I mean, the biggest problem, of course, is, let's say you've been in the foster care system for a while and you've been in 5 placements or 6 placements or something like that, and you just freaking throw a hissy fit. Seriously, don't we all throw a hissy fit every once in a while? It's embarrassing, I know. But what if it's just, what if you're just a kid and it's overwhelming and you start screaming, no, I'm not going to go to the next home, and writhing and kicking on the floor and stuff like that? What happens? Do police get called, or do enough adults tackle you that they break your neck and kill you? What exactly happens when you behave the way a normal kid might behave? Here's the conundrum. Despite fewer children entering foster care today as compared to 3 years ago, the likelihood that a child in foster care will interact with the criminal legal system has increased. In fact, one study showed that 70% of former foster care youth were arrested at least once before age 26. It's what I was telling you before about 407,000 people, kids in the system, and that's not to mention managing all of the foster families and institutional group homes and stuff like that. And you're working that through a $12 billion budget. And out of $12 billion, there's going to be some theft, there's going to be some waste, there's going to be corruption. If there's a dollar, and I'm not accusing anybody, but I'm just saying, if there's a dollar floating in the universe, there's 10 hands reaching to grab it. So don't think that with a budget of $12 billion a year, there isn't going to be some waste, all right? That's going to happen. And so you refer to that as the institutionalization of the foster care system. It's when It's when you have something that starts out as a small independent group of units where the needs of a child are met for a specific period of time until the parents are ready to reunite with the child and take back control of their family, which is all the initial design of the foster care system. When you think about it that way, it's really kind of concierge, isn't it? It's cookie cutter. I mean, it's not cookie cutter. It's everything is sort of, you look at the family, you look at their situation, you react accordingly. You put them in an appropriate home. Maybe you try to keep them in their school. You estimate how much longer it's going to be until they can be reunited. All those things. It's the way the system was supposed to work. It's extremely concierge in that way. But that's not what happens when you have 407,000 kids in a system. It becomes institutionalized. It becomes commoditized. Basically, it has to be into a cookie cutter or it can't function at all. And more money gets, siphoned off from going to the places where it's supposed to go to. But what happens is this institutionalization of the foster care system puts children at risk for further institutionalization in their adult life. In other words, the way the foster care system teaches kids to live, the kids become accustomed to that way of life and they live into that. Their moves, their movements toward advancement aren't the same because they're geared towards an institutionalization mindset. Starts inside the kids' heads. Often children entering foster care have been neglected, abused, traumatized for life. God almighty, some kids have just been, never mind. But they're expected to adjust to a foster care home or a placement on short notice. Pack your bag, we're going. Or we're going to a different place. Remember the place you woke up in this morning? You won't be there tomorrow. Not right. Children may have to change schools, move with their belongings in a trash bag, potentially place with untrained foster parents. I hope no one's going to tell me that just because a kid is placed in foster care doesn't mean they can't be neglected or abused or sexually trafficked, for God's sake. There's a shortage of adequate foster families. There's way too many kids in the system, 407,000. Due to the deeply flawed foster care system, many children who need safe and secure environments are left with a lack of structure and resources, creating the foster care to prison pipeline. That's what results from all this stuff. You can pay for it now or you can pay for it later with ruined lives and your money. Some studies have found that foster care children have an increased risk of behavioral issues after a recent placement, and many children have had the police called on them by their school administrator or their own caregivers. Children living in foster care homes are even more likely than children living with a foster family to have police called on them by staff members, especially for altercations between foster kids. For God's sake, who didn't fight? Can I ask you that question? When you are little boys growing up, you fight for some reason. I don't know why. You just do. And that's it. It's all little lion cubs and they beat each other up. And you don't want weapons. You don't want them to hurt each other desperately. But is that a reason to call the police every time? Is it? You need to know. Because, see, here's my point. If two people are fighting in a group home cafeteria and you need to call the police to break that up because your personnel who are there, who work there, they don't have the ability to break that up. Okay. Then A, you need to hire better trained personnel at that facility. And B, you have to consider the possibility that those two people who are doing that fighting need a different type of care. They shouldn't be placed in that situation where something could trigger them and bang, they're off to the races and hallelujah, call the police. The whole thing goes down the wrong path. And you can say, well, if they don't learn how to sit at a dinner table, then they never will. Save that for another day before you end up putting them in a situation where you call the police on them. It's not good to have that as a record. It's not good to be known as that. Okay? And so, yeah, the behavioral issues. Um, and having the police called on you by a staff member. There's something totally wrong about that if it's a standard, altercation. If there's weapons involved, maybe, you would certainly look at that differently. And so a certain amount of on-the-spot judgment has to be exercised. Granted, but, well, you're going to hear a couple stories in a minute. Oh, will you? Don't go away. The things from the, the National Foster Youth and Alumni Policy Council, the decriminalization stuff that's coming up in just a minute. Don't go away. Don't go away. This is so serious. All right, so everybody writes the same thing at the end of all these articles. Foster care as an institution needs more resources and empathetic, trauma-focused foster families. Empathetic, trauma-focused foster families. And procedures to aid children during their transition. It sucks for everybody involved. So why not train people properly? Resources for tutoring, college preparation programs, and therapy can help decrease the impact of the criminal legal system on children. Changing a child's mindset. Really, changing a child's mindset can go a long way to reducing their risk of detention. But you have to remember that when you are dealing with people who have suffered serious, complex childhood trauma, changing their mindset is something that has to start way earlier in the process than when they suddenly hit a well-trained foster family. Because changing somebody's mindset, first of all, that has to take place over years. And second of all, by trained personnel, because what happens when kids are super traumatized is their brains are rewired. They are just totally rewired. And so changing that mindset, that's going to require a lot from very early on. And additionally, there's a disproportionate number in children in need of a foster home compared to the available well-trained foster families in the system. More funds need to be allocated. $14 billion. $14 billion is somehow not enough. And when I think about $14 billion, I'm thinking about how many salaries, how many people's jobs are dependent on this. As the second you start to think about changing something where $14 billion is floating around, as soon as you think about changing that, capitalism flows right into the conversation. Because $14 billion budget, how many jobs is that? We'll try to find that out for you for next week, or maybe we can have one of our crack research team look that up. How many jobs, how many people does the foster care system employ out of that $14 billion budget? So you want to change the system, make it better. So do I. But are you going to blow up X number of jobs? It's probably not 1 billion jobs, but it, could be a couple 100,000. With 400,000 children in the foster care system, could be 100,000 caseworkers across the country. We need to find that out, and we will. So yeah, if you're going to change that, we're going to talk about changing. Then we're going to have to talk about changing, in a way that that doesn't just automatically put, hundreds of thousands of people out of work, unless we don't. Do the people who are caseworkers in this system, do the people who are management in this system, do the people who have their mortgages based on working in this industry. Oh, wow. There are over, here you go, information came in. There are over 9,713. Over 9,713. What a precise number to use the word over in front of. There are over 9,713 foster care workers currently employed in the United States. 79.9% of all foster care workers are women, while 20.1% are men. So men, the average foster care worker age is 42 years old. All right, so let's do the math, children. We got 407,000 divided by 9,700. Let's say 14 because it's over 9,713. All right, so when you look at it this way, there are 41.89 children per caseworker in this country. Now, tell me what can go right. 41.89.9, 42, we'll round it up, children per caseworker in this country. And though, so add a bunch of administrators on top of that. So we're paying salaries for 10,000 people. And then what else comes out of that budget? Buildings and telephones and utilities and all the costs that go into running an office in those places, legal pads, pens, Xeroxes, copiers, all that stuff goes into it. So much of that expense is sort of geared towards checking all the right boxes for doing reporting, but doesn't necessarily automatically aid the child. For Age Out Angels, I actually don't want to have offices. I never want to have offices. If I had offices, people would go to them. And what would be the point of that when we're supposed to be working with children and helping their lives be better, right? So I want you to take a look now at the, I know you can't see it, but I want you to take a look at the information that came from the most recent, I guess it's almost about a year-long research project that the National Foster Care Youth and Alumni Policy Council does pretty much every year. They turned this report in September of 2023. We found out about it a little late this year. Sorry, we tried to get them on the show and we couldn't. They just couldn't put it in their busy schedule once this got released. But this is a sensational report, and I want to read some parts of it to you. And hopefully this will help you understand what's actually going on from the mouths of the kids, okay? So this is a report called Decriminalize. This is what they call it a priority. What they would like to see happen now in 2024 is to decriminalize foster care. Now, okay, so this is a priority statement that they developed, and I want you to understand where it comes from. Okay, because this is not from the Census Bureau and stuff. They spoke with experts at Georgetown University's Center for Juvenile Justice Reform and reviewed all the available research. Then they also polled young people across the nation to understand their experiences. They received 138 responses from people across the country. Their experiences collectively and individually are incorporated throughout this priority. The priority being decriminalize foster care and the rationale, that sort of goes along with that. And let's take it from the top, boys and girls. Guess who's disproportionately reported to child welfare hotlines and subjected to investigations? Take a guess. Come on, you can do it. Guess what? It's African Americans. And I'm really starting to stop. I'm starting to stop use that term, African Americans. I'm just saying people of color at this point, because not everybody was African American. They're just people of color. We don't say, oh boy, here come the Russians anymore. It's African American. They're people of color. Makeup. All right. So anyway, make up 14% of our child population, but 23% of the foster care population. Okay. Similarly, Native American children account for 1% of the child population, but 2% of the foster care population, 100% more than it should be, right? Proportionately speaking. And guess who else gets screwed on this, huh? Should I take a moment and let you guess? LGBTQ plus, ladies and gentlemen. Youth are estimated to make up less. These are people who identify as such and are youth, okay? are estimated to make up less than 10% of all youth ages 13 to 17, but 30% of the foster care population. But 30% of the foster care population, 3 times. We must acknowledge the injustices and inequities which lead to overrepresentation of these youth and families within the foster care, juvenile, and criminal justice systems. So solutions have to be rooted in actually, equitable outcomes. The outcomes have to work for everybody. It can't just be a better way to spend the money. It has to have some real outcome. Now, look, let's talk about a real story here. 3, actually, short stories. They're short stories, but they're about real people. They're about real people. And none of us were there to help them. But maybe we can help the next ones. Decriminalizing the response to foster care involves reevaluating and reforming the way systems interact with families and children in need of support. How do those systems? Everything's a system. Okay, it's industrialized. It's commoditized. Everything is systematized because that's the only way I can function with the numbers that are that big. Okay, but reforming the way systems interact with families and children, maybe that could make a difference. Okay, and what I'm thinking here is we can't solve poverty, at least not in this hour. But maybe if the way the systems interact with families and children in need of support, the outcomes could be different. The primary goal should be to prioritize the well-being of children while minimizing punitive measures for children. Okay, so maximizing their well-being while punishing them the least, right? Isn't that what that means? Okay, buckle up your seat, okay? Buckle your seatbelt. Cedric Lofton, 17 years old, had a mental breakdown. He ran from a mental health evaluation. The caseworker told the foster father to call 911 and have police take Cedric to the evaluation. Cedric fought back when the police put him in leg shackles and a full body restraint harness. They took him to juvenile detention instead of a psychiatric unit. He died in restraints with 4 police officers on top of him. During lunch, Cornelius Frederick threw a sandwich at another boy in the Lakeside Academy cafeteria. A staff member responded by tackling Cornelius to the ground. And then for 12 minutes, as Cornelius struggled and gradually grew still, 7 men who worked for Lakeside held him down, some putting their weight on his legs and torso. 16-year-old Cornelius died 2 days later. Kids' lives matter. Kids' lives matter. Micaiah Bryant. Micaiah Bryant and 2 other young women argued over a messy house and unmade bed before a fight that ended with a fatal police shooting. She was only a 16-year-old teenage girl. What do these guys have in common? They were all teenagers. They were in the foster care system. They were African American. Their actions, which were pretty typical for teenagers, although the kid who ran away, he was telling you something totally different about what was needed, elicited an overreaction from adults charged with their safety. Sadly, their lives were taken and they are no longer with us. You don't see it on the nightly news. Nobody gives a damn. Kids get killed. Kids get killed. You'll see politicians on both sides will get up every once in a while and say, not if one person was injured. They get all high and mighty. If one person was injured, then, we should do something immediately and blah, blah, blah. There's hundreds of these stories. Do you think it isn't happening right now? And do you think it isn't happening right now in multiple places? Right now in multiple places. Some kid is getting his ass kicked over a ham sandwich. Foster care workers are 63% more likely. I'm getting all kinds of stats now. This has nothing to do with the article. Foster care workers are 63% more likely to work at private companies in comparison to government companies, with an average salary of around $46,000 a year. This is so depressing. It really is. It really is. So here, they make three proposals. They say those charged with our safety must remember that we are children and teenagers. Children and teenagers. They need a certain amount of tough love, but they also need the love part of that. Okay? Just the tough love without the love is bullshit. I'm sorry, but it just is. If all they know in their lives are tough love from the time they're little children, they just give up. You just can't, because they can't. The world's too confusing, and a person, except for the exceptional few, are not going to be able to cope with that. Okay? Those charged with our safety must remember that we are children and teenagers. Is that really too much to ask for? I hope not. Our caregivers need to understand our personal trauma and how that influences our behaviors. We aren't bad children or teens. We lived through bad things. Now, is it possible, are you listening to this show, and do you work with children, and are you not trauma informed? You have to be trauma informed. If you're not, then you don't belong in this system. I'm talking to you, state of Florida. You never know what's going to come out of you in Texas. You have to be trauma informed to work with this population. If you're not, you're a fool. Totally a fool. You're going to react incorrectly every time. And guess what? You probably couldn't live through what these kids have. I would venture to say, that if you are a caseworker because you were once in the foster care system, then a salud. You're wonderful. But if you were never in the system, if you don't know what it feels like, to be in that system, then you need to know. You need to get that training. Okay? And then finally, they say, we ask policymakers and child welfare leaders to disrupt the foster care to prison pipeline with intention and urgency. They wrote this very interesting paragraph on priority one, which is to remember that those charged with our safety must remember that they're children and teenagers. They wrote, we're kids and teens who watch the same TikToks as other kids, and they watch the same videos as teens who aren't in foster care. They dream of having a car. They struggle with algebra. They fight with their friends and family. We're kids and teens who sometimes break the rules the same as other kids and teens who aren't in foster care. They write, we are just like your own children, siblings, nieces, nephews, cousins, and neighbors. But let's look at what the poll respondents said the world is really like, okay? 81% of poll respondents reported interacting with law enforcement while in foster care. 81% of poll respondents reported interacting with law enforcement while in foster care. Of those, 46% interacted at least a few times while in care, and an astounding 23% on a monthly basis. Cheers. Now, that is not just criminal justice. That's interacting with law enforcement, okay? So you say 53% interacted with law enforcement when they were removed from their biological family, right? Well, it makes sense. Maybe law enforcement had to be there, right? Like when you look at it from the management lens, you say, well, yeah, the caseworker doesn't know what they're going to run into when they go to do a removal. Law enforcement may have to be there, so they're on the scene, so they take care of it. They bring the child to the next place. Done. All right. Now, this is a quote from a respondent to this poll. This is how the child feels. This is through the child's eyes. I was removed from my biological mother's care by a police officer. He did not speak to me during the car ride from Arvin, California to Bakersfield, California, which is 30 to 45 minutes. To a 10-year-old girl at 3 a.m., it seemed like an eternity. So somebody throws a statistic at you and says, well, it's not so bad that they're interacting because 53% of them are just getting transport. It's our tax dollars using trained police officers to transport some little snot-nosed kid. But the fact of the matter is that kid, 3 a.m., 10-year-old girl sitting in the back of a police car is absolutely petrified. Absolutely petrified. That child is just having an experience that she will never forget. Okay? So in that 81%, 28% were transferred from one placement to another by law enforcement. You know, like, can't they just maybe not, have all the guns on and everything when they do it? Could it not be in a police car? Could it just be, a couple of nice cops in a sedan who, have a radio? It looks more like a cab. Why would that be so bad? You have to establish your presence as law enforcement during the transport of the child. 56% witnessed police interaction with other youth in their placement. 13% called the police or 911 for help in their placement. 30% had their foster caregivers call law enforcement on them. 27% had their foster caregivers call law enforcement on other youth in their placement. And again, you have to look at individual circumstances. There's no system involved where if a foster caregiver really feels like they're in over their head, right? Instead of necessarily going straight to law enforcement, is the child in danger, a danger to others, a danger to themselves? That's sort of law enforcement. But is there no other area where that can be addressed that might be a little more sympathetic and understanding perhaps of specific needs of the child? And that costs less than 2 cops in a squad car. 48% attended a school with law enforcement or a school resource officer present. And I did. That was Atlantic City High School, man. The cops with dogs patrolling the school. And I think there was a little office they had in the basement. Here's another child says, police were present each time I was removed from biological family. I can't count the amount of times I've had police called on me and the times I've been in a cop car. And finally, the final quote from this group is, I felt inherently criminalized simply due to my status as a foster youth. So there. It's just, it's just like if you had an older brother who was a jerk and then you come into the school next and your teacher thinks you're a jerk because your older brother was. I'm not pointing out anyone specific. I'm just saying it can count against you in the long run. Young people reflected on how race and or ethnicity impacted the treatment that they received from law enforcement. And here's a couple of quotes on that. As a female BIPOC, is that how you say that correctly? Black, indigenous, or person of color. And at that time, okay, so let's say as a female person of color, and at that time, youth in foster care, the experience was tragic. And this is Massachusetts. We've heard from Florida, Texas, Massachusetts, California. These are from all over the country. Here you go. Here's one having to do with race and ethnicity. Being white, I had better interactions with the police than my foster siblings of color. But still, they treated us all like juvenile delinquents, even though we were all abused kids. And that is a current foster youth in extended care from Wisconsin. So this is coming in from all over the country. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and share. If you can get it on Facebook and share it, please do. This is just so important for people to understand what's going on here. Those charged with safety and well-being must see to it that they are. This is an interesting one. I had never heard this before. Have you ever heard of adultification bias? Adultification bias. This is a brand new one on me. It turns out that apparently children of color, black and brown children, okay, people see when they're younger, people see them as older than they actually are. It's called adultification bias. I mean, I know it happens in white world too. When if a kid happens to be particularly big, I remember a couple of children when my kids were growing up that were, exceptionally large in like kindergarten and first grade and stuff like that. And people always treated them like they were fourth, fifth, sixth graders and they were kindergartners. So I've seen that before, adultification bias, but I did not know that it was a particular bias related to children of color. Okay, for all children and teens, their brains are still developing. They don't respond to stress the same way adults do. And they struggle. They have impulses they don't understand. They struggle to control them. Okay, so there's got to be training. Their recommendations are training for foster parents, congregate care staff, all others caring for foster youth. And I don't mean just a workshop, I mean like actual training. They just say training, but I'm going to take it a step further. And I mean, be really trained. They have to be trained on adultification bias, on youth brain development, on de-escalation strategies. Teach restorative justice practices to support positive outcomes. Support interactions as opposed to punitive ones. Promote healthy relations between foster youth and the adults in their lives. Contribute to stability, healing, and permanency. And that's so important, promoting a healthy relationship between the foster youth and all of the adults, not the caretaker, not only this one or that one or the other one, but understanding how we all work together to make the child's life better, not how we all work together to scare the living shit out of them so that they do everything we tell them to do and become middle class, which they don't understand even a little bit. We need to create a response system so that foster youth caregivers and others can request immediate help in a crisis. There's got to be that intermediate step between, oh my God, this is getting out of hand, and shoot him, pin him down with 7 people, hog tie him, restrain him, and then leave him alone in a room for a while so he pees himself. No, it can't be that. Limit police involvement in family removal. Well, they're going to be there. Find alternatives who are trusted by youth, such as mental health professionals, trauma-informed advocates, or community leaders. So, all right. So now you start asking the question: how big do you want the party to be when you're removing someone from a house? How big do you want the party to be? How many police officers do you need? 2 police officers, depending on the situation. You want a mental health professional there. You might want a social worker there. Somebody wrote in exceptional information. Thank you for sharing it, and God bless you for saying that, please. Did you know that American children in foster care have higher rates of PTSD than adult soldiers who have been to war? Too often, young people in foster care are stereotyped as bad kids who are in foster care because of their own bad behavior. The stigma is pervasive. 65% of poll respondents report that someone introduced or reinforced the idea that they were bad and troublemaker and a troubled kid or a drug addict. Caregivers must stop these stereotypes. Our caregivers must be informed and aware of alternatives other than law enforcement to respond to what is often trauma-related behavior. It's the same. It's kind of the same thing we're talking about, and I love the drug addict part of it because for people who have severe anxiety, a little bit of weed can give them a night's sleep. So don't knock it. And if that's what puts them to sleep at night, and I know a lot of people for whom it does, then don't pretend you know more than somebody else does about their own life, and I won't pretend that I do either. Right? And then we can stop judging people based on all these things: bad, troublemaker, drug addict. Why are we using those terms to define people? I remember being told that I needed to be extra careful of my choices because if I made the wrong ones, then I would be labeled more harshly than that of normal kids. Normal. I love the word normal kids. That's a kid from Washington state, I presume. Caregivers call law enforcement in response to trauma-related behaviors. In the poll, 49% of young people said they had a caregiver threaten to call police or use threats of law enforcement as discipline. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to tell your father he's going to get the belt, right? That's been since the dawn of man. But police are too severe. It felt like I wasn't held to the same standards and expectations as others my age when it came to discipline. How many times do we need to hear it? It feels like the same thing, right? It made me feel fearful of making typical teenager mistakes as my punishment was so severe. It made me feel like I was walking on eggshells in the only place I was genuinely supposed to feel safe and nurtured. Jeez. It was scary because I was not doing anything that would warrant them to call the police, as they were simple things like arguing about the dishes. And since I saw the police arrest my dad and mom as well as them taking me out of my parents' house, this was a scary idea for me when I was younger. Again, that's Wisconsin. They recommend, several actions, of course, to support trauma-responsive and youth-centered interventions. Trauma-responsive and youth-centered interventions. Is that so hard? Inform young people and caregivers of the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, although somebody told me the other day they called there and they got put on hold. Could you imagine? It's not a joke. It's not a joke to call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 988 and get put on hold. It says help is available in Spanish. They can tell you to wait in 2 languages. Ensure case plans include alternatives to law enforcement in the event of a crisis. You can think ahead. If you think a child's behavior is somewhat predictable, you can think ahead. Don't expect it, but be prepared for it. There's got to be a professional difference there. If you're not a professional, then you might not be able to separate the two. But if you're a professional, you have to be able to separate the two. Decriminalize trauma, provide training for foster care and kinship caregivers, law enforcement, residential, and faculty staff on adolescent brain development. That's what it means to be trauma informed. You must understand adolescent brain development, the autonomic nervous system, and all the stuff that goes with it. You need to know that. And at every step of the way, every single impact point, that has to happen. Co-design and deliver the training with young people. Make sure their voices are heard, since after all, it's their table. Provide young people with comprehensive mental health supports and services which meet the diverse needs. This, God, what a problem this is. Because if the mental health system statistically appears to be working, and then you talk to real people and they go, no, either I can't get an appointment for 2 months, or all they do is give me more meds, and nobody's actually there's no healing taking place. So the mental health system is like a joke. They asked the policymakers and child welfare leaders to disrupt the foster care to prison pipeline with intention and urgency. Freaking do it now, for God's sake. What are we waiting for? When is the place when children are really going to be important in this country? I mean, really, that's kind of what it boils down to. Where is the place where children are actually going to be important enough, to warrant a full-on intervention as a last-ditch attempt to hold this 14 and possibly 17 or 18 billion dollar a year system to the standards for which we require for our American citizens. We have standards. We're not close. We're not even close to reaching that. Needs more resources and empathetic, trauma-focused foster families and procedures to aid children during their transition. Is that hard? But more resources for tutoring, college preparation programs. These are the things that make children have little achievements, incremental achievements that make them feel worthwhile along the way. Therapy to help decrease the impact of the criminal legal system on children. Changing a child's mindset can go a long way to reducing their risk of detention. Okay? The more children we can win over to peace and calm and love. Additionally, there's a disproportionate number of children in need of a foster home compared to the available of well-trained foster families in the system. More funds need to be allocated to train foster families to recognize the possible trauma, reactions, and responses to their future foster care children. Listen, I'm going to go a step further. I think that they need to up the stipend. They need to make it be something that people that is sought after. You know, being a foster parent is something that you should seek, because we save a fortune down the road, you know, just by paying people what they're worth now, right? So if we want our foster families to play the role of real parents, then let's make sure they can, and they're not just farms, you know, trying to live off the corporate teat, the government teat, but you know, give them a proper wage and teach them how to be parents to foster children. You know, the foster care to prison pipeline will continue to flow strong if the foster care system doesn't undergo serious institutional changes. Once children have the mentality that they are worth nothing or that no one cares for them, the criminal legal system does not seem as scary as it really is. My God, if you ever hear the words, "I ain't afraid of no prison," coming out of the mouth of a child, it's enough to like make you insane. It really is. And someone wrote in, and what we should end with tonight, okay? They're not a voting bloc. They have no voice or power. They're not a voting bloc. They have no voice or power. On that happy note, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for tonight. I want to thank you for joining me. I hope you got a little bit of perspective on what it's like to be a kid in the foster care system and how easy it is to behave normally but be treated abnormally and end up with it pretty much sending you down a life path that then becomes unavoidable. I hope we meet again next week. You're going to love my guest. Same time next week, February 5th. My guest is Fatima Scipio from the United Way of Greater Mercer County. You know, it's time to file taxes, everybody. There's good reason to do so. Oh my God, youth in foster care who have jobs leave withholding on the table when they could be getting it back. So much money. I'm trying to find out exactly how much money youth in foster care leave on the table. See if somebody has an estimate of that. But we'll see you again. So make a date to meet us right here. You, me, Fatima Scipio from the United Way of Greater Mercer County will be with me next week. And of course, thanks to our producer, Robin, to our engineer, Ruben. Now, Mozart changed the song on me this week. He's changing it to Symphony number 40 in G major. We told him we were fine with Symphony number 39. He didn't have to write the 40th. But no, he's a perfectionist. So he decided to write the 40th in G major. And we're going to sign off with that tonight. So remember, boys and girls, it's only Monday. Stay safe. Until next time, there's still plenty of time to make this week the best week ever. Good night, everyone.